Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever in the world you are, and welcome to this program. Tonight, we would like to start by discussing um, the big issue happening in Zimbabwe. I'll just give a quick summary of the situation there. The matter regards the delimitation, as this is just deciding on the borders of the constituency by the Zimbabwe Election Commission, ZEC. Beginning of this month, the ZEC submitted their report to Parliament for consideration, the delimitation report. A certain Mr Tonderai Chidawu wrote to Parliament to say that the report was not produced by all ZEC commissioners, and therefore then they should not consider it. And apparently Parliament ignored his complaint, and they went ahead and discussed the delimitation report, and they've since produced their own report commenting on that report, which was then passed on to the president. Tonderai Chidawu has since submitted a court application to the Constitutional Court. And this complaint is that Parliament should have investigated, and by refusing to investigate it, they failed to fulfill their constitutional obligation to make state institutions, in this case ZEC, accountable. And the Constitutional Court has said they will hear the case, but not on an urgent basis. What is at issue here is the way this ZANU-PF is playing mind games with the people of Zimbabwe. This delimitation report is supposed to be deciding the boundaries of each of the 210 parliamentary constituencies. Now, those boundaries will depend on the distribution of the voters. So ZEC is supposed to have produced a verified voters roll. And this has been a matter of contention all along. ZEC has failed to produce a verified voters roll. And therefore then, for them to go ahead and produce the delimitation report on the basis of a verified voters roll that doesn't exist is the big issue. But for this guy, Chidawu, to be making a mountain out of a molehill about the report that was produced was not signed by all the 9 ZEC commissioners, but only the chairperson and his vice. That may well be the case, but that is a minor issue. The big issue here is the failure to produce a verified voters roll, particularly when there have been so many people complaining about the failure to produce the verified voters roll. To discuss the issue, I've got Benjamin. Welcome to you, Benjamin.
Thank you very much for having me on the program. Good day, viewers.
What do you say to this?
It's always been the case, really, where we ask the wrong question and uh, we keep. I don't know why we want to take the long way around instead of just going straight to the point. The point is, how do you come to the conclusion that this is how you are going to, let's say in easy terms, subdivide to get the various boundaries when you don't have the total number of, well, the distribution basically. It makes absolutely no sense because there is no verified voters roll that has been produced so that people can actually sum up the total and see how you got to the answer. So I don't know, it's just a matter of kind of asking wrong questions always, taking the long way around.
Well, in this particular case, the people who should be asking the questions themselves are not asking the right questions. And I
Yes.
think it is deliberate. To start with, this guy, if he was truly concerned about the delimitation process producing the right results, and so that we have got properly divided constituencies, he surely should have known, even if all the nine ZEC officials had signed it, to produce a delimitation report without a verified voters roll is totally meaningless. And so, why is he making an issue of the report was produced by only two commissioners and not all nine of them had signed it? So this is deliberate. And for the parliamentarians themselves, they were been aware of the fact that people have been complaining about the failure to produce the verified voters roll. This has been an outstanding issue that has been on the national agenda for uh, donkey years. It's coming up again and again and again. And in this particular case, for these coming elections, there's been a group, Team Pachelu, that have done excellent work. And they've exposed that the copies of the delimitation of the voters' roll that has been made available had so many uh, glaring errors. People being moved from one constituency to another, from one ward to another, without the individual knowing it. A number of individuals' names being um, um repeated, duplicated. You know, there's been so many errors, and they have requested specifically ZEC to produce a verified voters roll, and ZEC has stubbornly refused to produce it. So this is a situation where ZANU PF controlled parliament does not raise the important question: do you have a verified voters roll? And they go ahead and discuss the delimitation report, um, and ignore that point completely. And then our friend here who is challenging it, he doesn't raise the important question. His focus is on a trivial matter. You know, I think this is deliberate, Benjamin.
Yes, I agree. It's just a ploy or a decoy, let me say, to get us off the, get our eyes off the ball. I mean, first of all, let's look at the composition of parliament. We know that the majority of parliament right now, of the sitting parliament right now, is Azano PF members. But then you find these are not the only people that could have voted for the the the, 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 the actual to go ahead and debate. The triple C members were there, the MDC members were there. Why did they not oppose? So I feel sometimes we always are quick to say ZANU PF has done this, ZANU PF has done. Of course, ZANU PF will do that because that is what they want. They want the, the elections to continue the way they have been continuing and in favor of them. But what are the other parliamentarians, which are the opposition, what are they doing? Are they they're not even tabling any of these, you know, these questions to say, what about the voters' role? In and out. If you do it in and out, somebody is bound to listen. But they are not. Rather, they are, like you said, they are always dealing with trivial issues, things that do not, you know, that are not as urgent as the verified voters' role, as tabling reforms, which will stop this from happening anyway.
I think you raise an important point there, and in this particular case, it's important to understand that in the past, our opposition friends have participated in these elections without a verified voters roll. So maybe in that regard, it comes as no surprise at all that our friends in the opposition are ignoring that point. And we've discussed it on this program and in other forums that the opposition in this particular case, they know with or without a verified voters roll, ZANU-PF is going to allow them to win a few seats, particularly in the urban centers. And as far as they are concerned, this is good enough. So they will participate, they've participated in the past in elections without a verified voters roll, and many other problems, glaring problems, violence, um, vote buying, and so forth. And they've still went ahead and participated, and knowing fully well that by participating, they're giving ZANU-PF legitimacy. And as long as they get their share of the spoils of the vote of power, they're quite happy with that. But I think in this particular case, the this issue actually by this gentleman Chidawu seems to be an in-house factional fighting in ZANU-PF. According to reports, it looks like the Chiwenga, the Vice President Chiwenga faction, is in favor of the present delimitation report because it weakens Mnangagwa, the Mnangagwa faction. Uh, and the Mnangagwa faction is against it for that reason, and hence the infighting within ZANU-PF. So if for instance, the Constitutional Court was to rule that the process was not done properly uh, and ask the ZEC to do it all over again. Remember, these elections have got to be held by end of July at the latest, because that's when the 5-year period would have ended. And the delimitation report must be submitted to Parliament. The final report must be submitted to Parliament at least 6 months before the election. So, in other words, if the Constitutional Court orders ZEC to do the delimitation all over again, they will definitely not be able to submit their initial report, Parliament comment on it, and then they produce the final report in time to hold the parliamentary election end of July. The 6 months will be up. And that result will favor the Mnangagwa faction, who would prefer to have the election held on the basis of the last delimitation report, the last the constituency boundaries. That is problematic in the sense that even that 2018 delimitation was done without a verified voters roll. So we are just compounding the situation here. And that is what is at issue here. That, we are being shortchanged either way.
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I mean, I I want to say this, that ZANU PF is doing what ZANU PF has always done. So this should not surprise us. What should surprise us is, despite all these happenings, the opposition are still gearing up to go ahead and to participate in something that you cannot even trace. How do you know where your constituency starts and ends? How do you know your people inside that constituency? How do you plan for them? Because you don't know the figures. It's quite astonishing how we get to the result before we even ask the question. And
Yeah.
I honestly believe that the opposition, they are not really in it for the people. They are just in it to try and see how much they can line their pockets as well.
That is the tragedy here. And in this particular case, it is clear that ZANU PF is. This is not the first time, in fact, this has happened, where ZANU PF has come up and made a mountain out of a molehill of a trivial issue to draw attention away from the real big issue. And I totally agree with you that the opposition, although they have been complaining about the lack of the verified voters roll, when it matters, when it matters, when they could have raised it in Parliament, they always fail to do so. And they seem to endorse this NOPF position and go along with it. They don't want to rock the boat. And this we have seen again and again and again. Godfrey, welcome. And sorry we started and you joined, but I'm sure you've read the article. What do you think of this shenanigan going on in Zimbabwe in regarding the ZEC delimitation report?
I think they are just buying time, just to try and revert to a situation which places them, in other words, the situation that was there before. They will use old documents, documents that are probably loaded in their favor. I haven't gone into further details, but from what I see, I think it's just a matter of trying to buy time.
I totally agree. And in fact, before you joined, we were saying that in this particular case, this issue that Chidawu is raising and taking to the Constitutional Court and so forth to me is a trivial issue. That's just making a mountain out of a molehill. The big issue here is the delimitation report was produced without a verified voters roll. So if you don't have a verified voters roll, how can you have come up with a properly divided delimitation? And to revert back to the 2018 constituency boundaries is just compounding the problem, because you did not produce a verified voters roll before that election, and therefore then you are referring to something that you should that was incorrect anyway. And this is just ZANU-PF typically just ignoring the real issues that affect real people, and concentrating on issues that are more in-house for them, which have got absolutely no bearing on what the country is facing. The big challenge here is that the 2023 elections should be free, fair, and credible. So we already start with a process that is so flawed that already you can say these elections are going to be contested. How can you have it any other way? When you start with a voters' roll that is, you don't have a verified voters' roll.
But
I agree.
Is that their reason for rejecting it? Their reason for rejecting it is that it didn't go through, or it wasn't. The process of approval of it was flawed. They are not even addressing the fundamental issue, which would be on what is it based. But they are just mentioning. I think that's what the application was based on. That it didn't pass through the normal or the approved process of the approving that.
Well, so you're correct there. I mean, that is what the application is all about. This is why we're saying here that this whole thing is a decoy to draw people's attention away from the real burning issue, that ZEC has produced a delimitation report that is not based on a verified voters' roll. And he is coming up with, not every member of the ZEC commission had produced that delimitation report.
I think
so even if all of them had produced it, the whole process will still be flawed because you still don't have a verified voters' roll.
Yes, I agree with you. His question or his complaint would be a secondary question, but the first question there should be this whole, how did you go about this whole process? That should be the first question, and then you ask, okay, why didn't every commissioner sign? That is a secondary question, but the main question should be, where is the verified voters roll that you use to delimitate the whole place?
Exactly, and even the
nobody is
commissioners
asking
themselves
from
who are
opposition. Yes.
Even the commissioners who are saying they didn't sign this preliminary delimitation report, they are not saying we did not sign it because it's not based on a verified voters' roll. They just say they didn't sign it. So this is typical. A situation is, so what is it? Why did you fail to sign it? You knew the deadline was you must produce the verified a preliminary report in Parliament, so that Parliament has got time to debate it and comment on it, and then you have got time to produce the final report, so that it's submitted 6 months before the election date is announced, and you had 5 years to do that. So for them to suddenly say, "Oh no, we didn't. We were not involved in producing that initial report." Why? They didn't say. They haven't said. Parliament should have, when they heard that it's only 2 people from out of 9 who had signed that report. I agree they should have investigated. And Parliament itself should have also asked. Is this based on a verified voters' roll? Because they knew a verified voters' roll is one of the contention issues in Zimbabwe elections. They didn't.
Yeah, although they might get away with this one, the issue of reverting to the one that was used before. They could say, we've already done election based on that, so we are all going to take it as an approved document, although it wasn't. They might say we can't start
The problem
digging
is,
what we used in the last election, because we have already moved on and the elections were held. Everything was legal because we accepted the results that were based on the document which you are now saying was flawed. You should have
our main issue should not be whether they are going to use this new method or the 2018 method or the 2000 method. The issue should be, how did they come up with the process in the first place without a verified voters roll? The question is on the verified voters roll. That is where the question should be, not which one are they going to use. That doesn't matter, because either way, both of them, they are incorrect as long as you don't have a verified voters roll. How did you get to those figures? So the question that it doesn't really matter. I feel it doesn't really matter to ask about the whole delimitation process. The problem is with the voters roll. How did you get to the answer when you don't have the question? Because the question is that voters roll. That's what gives you boundaries. That gives you the whole map of how the election process will be.
Okay.
So without that, how do you get?
You can finish, Ben.
No, I'm done.
You're done.
Thanks.
But I was just going to then ask you, if they say we used last time's voters roll, what would be the next? How would you contest that?
There? The first thing, is it there? Because it has never been brought out. I think they've failed not just once, but on numerous times. When ZEC was asked, the last election, the observers said the elections lacked traceability. You could not trace. So how do we use that when we could not trace in the first place? We need something that we can, that has accountability, that can be traceable, to say, okay, we got these number of votes because of people that were here or there. As it is currently, there is no verified voters roll, so we cannot trace. So either way, we can use the last method or we can use this method. We still have no traceability.
Well, I think the point you are making, both of you are making, is correct. But here, the question, the issue is, if people fail to raise the issue of there is no verified voters roll in 2018, that was a failure on their part. Be it ZEC, be it Parliament, be it the Constitutional Court itself, because they could have raised it. Even for the 2018, when we went into the 2018, that issue was raised by a number of other people, saying there's no verified voters roll. But like Benjamin said earlier on, our opposition seem to always overlook these key points when it comes to elections. And we know why, because they know, at least at the end of the day, they'll still get the few gravy train seats, regardless of how flawed the process gets. But I think as interested Zimbabwean, we know that a verified voters roll is absolutely necessary for free, fair, and credible elections. And in this particular case, for this coming election, this year's elections, the issue of a verified voters roll has been on the table So none of the players can now pretend they didn't know it, or they were not aware of the fact that we didn't have a verified voters roll, because it has been on the national agenda since the last election. How many times, how many different individuals have requested a verified voters roll and they failed to be given a verified voters roll? So that one is important now. And for them to revert back to 2018, people should remind them that in 2018, the voters, the delimitation was done. I don't know. I think the delimitation was not done actually before the 2018 elections. But whenever the last time it was done, there was no verified voters roll. So we are keeping on compounding a problem, basing it, constituencies, basing them on a voters roll that was not even there. Why have we failed to produce a verified voters roll? That is the question that ZEC should be asked. They had 5 years to produce a verified voters roll. According to their own report, as of May last year, only 250,000 Zimbabweans had registered to vote. So it's not as if to say they were overwhelmed by the number of people who registered to vote. You know, they were not. So why they failed to come up with compiling that figure if they had a voters roll last time, which they should have, because there's no way you can say they didn't have. It was not verified, but they had a voters roll. Why have they failed to produce one now? That is the question.
Thank you very much. That's a very good question.
Yeah, I wonder if the representatives, the members of parliament, really know what it all means with this voters' roll and delimitation. Because they should have raised, like Ben was saying, they should have raised this query instead of just approving and getting someone else from outside to question that. Are they just working in cahoots with the ruling party, or they don't know what they are supposed to be looking at and what it means in the end?
I think, Godfrey, that question is one way you can say it has to be surely they are working in cahoots with an appeal. Because how can you, I mean, if you were elected, if you are in parliament, it means you were elected. Senators, yes, some of the senators, but were nominated out of the proportional representation system. But even then, most of them would have participated in the election, and also to increase their chances of being elected in the proportional representation, they would have probably participated in the election process. So the question then is, if you were genuine about the elections should be free, fair, and credible, and a true reflection of the will of the democratic will of the people, then you would have had a voters' roll where you were going through. I stood once in Harare council elections, and I had a voters' roll for the council that I was in, the ward I was in, and the list. You follow the list. You go to an address, Godfrey, and you go there and you say, okay, according to the list here, there are 5 voters here. And then you go there, you find then it's just an address. There is nobody there. You say to yourself, okay, so those 5 people were given, must have been given the same address. And then you try to find out and you find out, that was just a one-room show business owned by a SANU-PF loyalist. And he registered those people. They couldn't have been even workers because he had only one worker. So you can tell this is part and parcel of corrupting the voters' roll, corrupting the system, where you front load the voters, the number of voters, registered voters, in favor of a particular candidate. Those people should not be on the voters' rolls. And in this particular case, that's why it is important to have a verified voters' roll.
Yes, it's so messed up within that voters' roll that, I mean, look at it. We At one point we had to re-register. I thought maybe we were fixing the mistakes that we had and removing, you know, the you know the irregularities that we had. But you still find those irregularities are still in that same voters' roll. Right? You go when it's time for election, you find your next of kin that passed long back are still in it. Yet we created a new one. How does that work?
Yeah, the process has already started, and the end can be predicted that it will also be unverifiable. The results will also be unverifiable, because what we are entering into the system is just garbage, and in the end, we will also get garbage results. Yeah, I think that's our problem. We are not diligent, or the people that we have put forward are not diligent. They don't grasp the essentials of the process and their effect on the result.
I think they actually know what they are doing is wrong, especially when it comes to the opposition. They know what they were supposed to do, but they are not doing it because uh, I think probably their power has been taken away from them. Because usually, what I always say is you need to follow the money. When you follow the money, that is where the power is coming from, or and where the power is going. So you like Mr. Mukori says, he says, don't rock the boat too much, just stir it up a bit.
Yeah. So I think this is the unfortunate reality. I totally agree with you there, gentlemen. Um, Maybe to finish up the program, I thought we could listen to this program on Hard Talk, talking about what happened in Brazil. I'll just play the short video of it, and then we can give in our closing remarks regarding it.
Coup attempt to account. All of that while Lula faces a mountain of economic, social, and political challenges. My guest is Celso Amorim, former foreign minister, now Lula's foreign policy advisor. Is Brazil becoming ungovernable?
Well, gentlemen, there we have it. I think we could ask ourselves the same question as well. Is Zimbabwe becoming ungovernable? And personally, I think that is a very relevant question, particularly when you look at the situation here where we have again and again and again failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And that leaves the door open. The only way you're going to change the system is through another coup, or we could have a situation here where it's now the even if the opposition was to win the election, ZANU PF loyalists plus the securocrats will cooperate, because what happened in Brazil could not have happened without the securocrats cooperating as well. And we know that in Zimbabwe that possibility is there. Benjamin, do you want to give your closing remark on that particular issue in the short clip?
I believe that the situation in Brazil will not happen in Zimbabwe. Why? Because I think the opposition are very comfortable with whatever they are getting from participating in a flawed process. So they will just continue with the same method or operation as what is provided for them or to them.
Benjamin, thanks very much, Benjamin. Godfrey?
I think the possibility of that happening, it can only happen if opposition wins. If the people with very little power do win, which is a remote possibility at the moment. But should it happen, I think the foundation for such is there, and it has been ripe, it has been used indirectly, and I think everything is there for that to happen.
Thanks very much, Godfrey. My personal view is that that possibility, we should not rule it out at all, because the failure to hold democratic elections is putting this present system under serious stress. They know the populace are restless. They're desperate for change. And remember, the 2017 coup was in-house, but they used the excuse for it to say, oh, we want to fix the economy. You know, the people are restless. We want to solve the problem of the economic mismanagement and corruption that has destroyed the country. And they were blaming on the G40. So they can still blame each other. And in this particular case, use that as the excuse for one faction being booted out, so that another one could take over. And in this particular case, that could easily happen. It has happened before, and they know the people are restless, and they use the people to ride on that wave to destabilize the country. They could make it, the fact that they control the securocrats, they can make it ungovernable. If the securocrats turn a blind eye to the rioting and so forth, that will force whoever is in power at the time to step down. And we saw it happen with Mugabe. It will be tragic for Zimbabwe if we keep the only way we're going to change regimes is through street protests or another military coup, or a combination of both. That will be tragic, because invariably they do not come up with a solution. They do not fix the problem. The 2017 military coup did not end the mismanagement and the corruption. It just changed it. It was a musical chairs. One lot was removed, another one came in. And the corruption and mismanagement is continued. That is the tragedy here. Thanks very much, gentlemen. And I think with that, we'll close.
Thank you. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you, listeners.